The signature on the report is precise, clinical. General Erwin Rommel does not write with emotion, but the date tells a different story. June 10th, 1942. Libya, Bir Hakeim. Feldmarschall Rommel, the Desert Fox, architect of lightning warfare, has been stalled, not by British armor, not by superior numbers, by 3,500 free French soldiers in a dusty fort he was supposed to capture in hours. 16 days ago, the report sits on a desk in Berlin. An intelligence officer reads it twice, then a third time, because what Rommel describes contradicts everything Wehrmacht Command knows about the French military, everything they learned in 1940. The garrison fought with extraordinary tenacity and skill. Their defensive preparations were professional, their morale unshakable. These are not the French we defeated 2 years ago. The officer underlines one sentence, then pauses. How is this possible? The same nation that collapsed in 6 weeks, the same army that fled to Sudan, the same officers who signed surrender at Compiègne while their tanks still had fuel and their fortifications still stood intact. Those French. But now, according to the Desert Fox himself, they are fighting like demons. If this story challenges everything you thought you knew about World War II France, hit that like button and subscribe, because this is the military resurrection that Hollywood forgot to film. The intelligence officer pulls another file. Operation Cycle. The Dunkirk evacuation. May 1940. French First Army holds a perimeter while British forces evacuate. They fight to the last bullet, to the last man in many cases. The rearguard action that made the miracle possible. The officer adds a note. French soldiers capable of exceptional performance under certain conditions. Conditions present at Dunkirk. Conditions apparently present at Bir Hakeim, but absent during main campaign. Why? He does not know that in a villa in London, a tall French general with a prominent nose is asking the same question. Charles de Gaulle has 1,700 men under his command, not 17 divisions. 1,700 individual soldiers, the ones who said no to the armistice, who fled to Britain rather than accept defeat, who believed that France's honor was not negotiable. De Gaulle calls them the Free French Forces, the Forces Françaises Libres. His staff calls them madmen. The British call them, privately, a political gesture. Symbolic, de Gaulle's personal crusade. Useful for propaganda, not for actual fighting. Even de Gaulle, in his darker moments, wonders if they are enough, if symbols can win wars, if honor can stop tanks. He remembers 1940, the confusion, the paralysis, the rot that started at the top and spread downward through the chain of command. Generals who did not believe in victory. Politicians who prepared for defeat before the first shot was fired. The French army of 1940 did not lack brave soldiers. It lacked faith. But these men, these 1,700 who followed him to England, they have something different. Something the intelligence officer in Berlin is beginning to recognize in Rommel's reports. They chose to be here. Every single one of them made a decision. Left families, abandoned careers, defied orders, became traitors in the eyes of Vichy France, became outcasts for the chance to keep fighting. That choice changes everything. The sand around Bir Hakeim is the color of old bone, pale, lifeless, baking under sun that climbs past 50 degrees Celsius by noon. General Marie-Pierre Koenig, commander of the 1st Free French Brigade, watches German armor formations through his binoculars. Panzers, hundreds of them. Rommel's Afrika Korps, the most successful armored force in German military history. They have been attacking for 2 weeks. Koenig Brigade should have fallen in 2 days. Maximum. That was a German estimate, based on French performance in 1940, based on everything Wehrmacht intelligence knew about French military capability, based on simple mathematics. 3,500 defenders cannot hold against 15,000 attackers with their superiority and armor advantage. But mathematics does not account for motivation. The first attack came at dawn on May 27, 1942. Stuka bombers. The sound alone was meant to shatter morale. The screaming sirens. The bombs walking across defensive positions with methodical precision. Koenig's men dug deeper. Then came the tanks. Panzer Mark IIIs and IVs. The same tanks that had chased the British across North Africa. The same tanks that had rolled through France 2 years earlier. The French had anti-tank guns, outdated, inadequate, but positioned with care, sighted with professional skill. Every shot mattered because ammunition would not last. The first wave of panzers stopped 800 meters from the perimeter, burning. 3 tanks destroyed, 4 disabled. Not enough to stop an armored assault, but enough to make German commanders recalculate. This would not be easy. Rommel's plan required speed. The British Eighth Army was retreating toward Egypt. Bir Hakeim was supposed to be a footnote, a supply depot captured in passing. Then the Afrika Corps would pursue the British, cut them off, destroy them before they reached Alexandria. But the French would not cooperate. Day 3. The Luftwaffe drops leaflets. Surrender terms. Generous treatment. Safe passage. Koenig burns them publicly. Day 5. German infantry probes the southern defenses. Night attack. Professional. Well coordinated. They find minefields. Not randomly scattered. Systematically laid. Overlapping fields of fire. Defensive positions that require 3 separate assaults to crack. The attack fails. Day 7. Rommel himself visits the front. Studies the French positions. Speaks with his commanders. They fight intelligently, he tells his chief of staff. This is not the army we defeated in France. But it is. That is what nobody understands yet. These are the same soldiers. Same training. Same doctrine. Same equipment. Much of it. What changed was not their capability. It was their reason. In 1940, French soldiers fought because they were ordered to fight, because it was their duty, because the government said so. At Bir Hakeim, they fight because they chose to fight, because they crossed an ocean to get here, because defeat is not an option when you have already lost everything once. Day 10. The water runs low. Each man receives 1 liter per day, in 50-degree heat, carrying ammunition, digging, fighting. Koenig radios British command. Situation critical. The British offer evacuation. Koenig refuses. Not yet. Day 14. The German attacks intensify. Artillery barrage that lasts 6 hours. Then infantry. Then tanks. Then more artillery. The French perimeter shrinks. 200 meters lost on the eastern side. 40 men dead. 112 wounded. But the line holds. Rommel's schedule is demolished. The British have escaped. The Afrika Corps, the formation that pioneered Blitzkrieg in North Africa, has been stole by a brigade of French soldiers everyone said would fold immediately. Day 16. June 10th. Koenig receives orders from British command. Withdraw. You have done enough. That night, under cover of darkness, 2,700 free French soldiers break through German lines. They carry their wounded. Leave nothing for the enemy. German soldiers, watching them escape, do not fire. Later, interviewed after the war, a German officer who fought at Bir Hakeim explains why. We had orders to shoot, but many of us did not. They had earned passage. They fought like we would fight if Germany were occupied, with everything they had. You do not shoot such men in the back. The report reaches Wehrmacht High Command 3 weeks after Bir Hakeim falls. An analyst adds it to a growing file labeled French Combatant Assessment, Revision. The file is thin, but troubling, because it contradicts the foundational assumption of German military planning, the assumption that France, defeated once, would stay defeated, that Vichy France represented the totality of French military capability, that the soldiers who fled to join de Gaulle were refugees, not warriors. But the evidence says otherwise. The analyst turns to another document, an assessment from the Italian front. October 1943. The German defensive position known as the Gustav Line, stretching across the Italian peninsula. Mountains, rivers, fortifications that have stopped the American Fifth Army cold for 3 months. The Americans try frontal assault, try flanking maneuvers, try overwhelming firepower. Nothing works. Then the French arrive. Not many. The French Expeditionary Corps, 4 divisions, commanded by General Alphonse Juin. Units rebuilt from free French forces, North African troops, and soldiers from territories that never accepted Vichy authority. Juin is 54 years old, lost his right hand in the First World War, keeps fighting, knows mountains, knows his soldiers, He studies the Gustav Line and sees something the Americans missed. The mountains are not obstacles. They are opportunities for soldiers who know how to fight in them. The German commanders see the French arrive and relax slightly. France has already fallen. These are colonial troops mostly, not like the Americans with their equipment and artillery. No threat. January 19th, 1944. The French attack at Monte Cassino. Not at the monastery everyone focuses on. At the mountains behind it. The peaks the Germans think are impossible. The French mountain troops, the Chasseurs Alpins, the Moroccan Goumets, the Tunisian soldiers, they go up at night, carrying their weapons and ammunition. Upslopes German engineers calculated were too steep for military operations. By dawn, they hold positions German commanders thought were unreachable. The Gustav Line, impregnable from the front, becomes vulnerable from above. The attack opens a gap the Americans exploit. The line that held for 3 months begins to collapse. A German division commander writes in his after-action report, French mountain troops demonstrated superior tactical skill and physical endurance. Their infiltration techniques were exemplary. They attacked with aggression and intelligence we did not anticipate. He adds a note in the margin. Personal observation, not for official record. These men fight like veterans. Where did Vichy France hide such soldiers? He does not understand. Vichy France did not hide them. Vichy France pushed them away. Every man in Juin's corps chose to be there. Every Moroccan Gaumier, every French mountain soldier, every Tunisian infantryman. They said no to the armistice, no to collaboration, no to acceptance. They said yes to fighting, even when it seemed hopeless, even when France itself had surrendered. That choice matters on the battlefield. A Wehrmacht intelligence summary from March 1944 analyzes French performance in Italy. Enemy French forces demonstrate marked improvement over 1940 capabilities. Troop morale excellent. Officer leadership aggressive and competent. Tactical execution sophisticated. These forces present significant threat and should not be underestimated. The analyst who writes this report served in France in 1940. He remembers French units surrendering with full ammunition stores. Remembers officers who seemed relieved when defeat came. These are not those officers. Not those soldiers. Something changed. August 15th, 1944. Southern France. Operation Dragoon. Allied forces land between Cannes and Toulon. American, French, British air support. The operational plan gives specific objectives. The port of Toulon will take 15 days to capture. Heavily fortified. German garrison of 18,000 troops. Naval guns. Coastal batteries. The French First Army, under General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny, is assigned to take Toulon. De Lattre is 55, fought in the First World War. Arrested by Vichy authorities in 1942 for opposing German occupation of southern France. Escaped prison. Fled to North Africa. Joined de Gaulle. Like Juin, like Koenig, like every free French commander, he chose to keep fighting when France's government chose to stop. His soldiers carry that same choice inside them. The attack on Toulon begins August 20th, 5 days after the landing. The Americans, watching the French advance, shake their heads. Too fast, too aggressive. The Germans will cut them to pieces. But the French have something the Americans do not understand. They are fighting for French soil. For 4 years, they have fought in deserts and mountains and foreign countries. For 4 years, they have been exiles. Refugees in the name of resistance. Now they are home. Every hill they take is French earth. Every village they liberate is a French village. The civilians who emerge from cellars speak their language. Remember them. The German garrison commander at Toulon, Admiral Johannes Bockmann, expects standard siege warfare. Gradual advance. Artillery duel. Weeks of attrition. Instead, the French come like water. Around strong points. Through gaps. Over walls, using local knowledge, using street fighting skills learned in North Africa. Bockmann's defensive plan depends on holding perimeter forts long enough for reinforcement. But the French do not siege the forts. They bypass them. They strike directly at the city. At the harbor, at headquarters, the perimeter forts find themselves isolated, surrounded, cut off. August 27th. 7 days after the attack began, 8 days ahead of schedule, Toulon falls. 18,000 German soldiers surrender. 28 ships captured. One of the largest ports on the Mediterranean secured. A Wehrmacht after-action report tries to explain. French forces attacked with reckless disregard for casualties. Standard defensive measures proved insufficient. Enemy demonstrated intimate knowledge of terrain and urban environment. Morale remained high despite losses. French soldiers fought as if personally motivated beyond normal military discipline. The German author cannot articulate what he observes, cannot explain the difference between soldiers following orders and soldiers fighting for home. Marseille falls September 1st, 12 days ahead of schedule. The second largest city in France, liberated by French soldiers who 4 years earlier were called traitors by their own government. The Latre stands in the city center. Watch as civilians celebrate. Watchers as soldiers, Moroccans and Tunisians and metropolitan French and Senegalese, embrace old women who remember the First World War, who remember when France was not a collaborator but a nation. An American liaison officer approaches, congratulates de Latre. Your men fought well, he says. Professional respect. De Latre nods, does not smile. They fought for France, he says. That is all they have ever wanted to do. The intelligence officer in Berlin reviews reports from all fronts. North Africa, Italy, southern France. The pattern is unmistakable. Free French forces perform significantly above 1940 baseline. Tactical competence high. Morale exceptional. Combat effectiveness comparable to elite German units. But the most troubling aspect is not their skill. It is their motivation. Wehrmacht psychological warfare doctrine depends on breaking enemy morale. Propaganda, leaflets, radio broadcasts, demonstrations of superior firepower. It worked in 1940. It worked against the French army then. It does not work now. Free French soldiers do not surrender. Do not break. Do not root. Because they already made their choice. 4 years ago, when they said no to Vichy, when they crossed to England or fled to Africa or disappeared into the resistance. Every battle since then is confirmation of that choice. Every victory is vindication. Every defeat is just another reason to keep fighting. You cannot break that with propaganda. A German psychological operations report from late 1944 admits defeat. Enemy French forces demonstrate resistance to standard demoralization techniques. Appeals to reason and self-preservation yield no results. These soldiers appear to have adopted ideological commitments similar to Soviet partisans. Traditional psychological warfare methods ineffective. The comparison to Soviet partisans is telling. The Wehrmacht learned the hard way that soldiers fighting for home, for ideology, for survival of their nation, these soldiers do not quit. The Free French have become the same kind of fighter. August 25, 1944. Paris. The city has been occupied for 1,539 days, more than 4 years. German soldiers patrol the Champs-Élysées. Nazi flags hang from the Eiffel Tower. But beneath the surface, the city seethes. The Forces Françaises de l'Intérieur, the Free French forces of the interior, the resistance, cells and networks and groups that have waited for this moment since 1940. They rise. August 19th, the Paris police strike. Refuse German orders. Barricade themselves in prefecture headquarters. August 20th, barricade appear across the city. Paving stones ripped up. Furniture piled in streets. Citizens become soldiers overnight. The German garrison commander, General Dietrich von Koltitz, has explicit orders from Hitler. If Paris falls, burn it. Destroy the bridges. Demolish the monuments. Leave nothing for the Allies. Koltitz is a professional officer, not a fanatic. He remembers Rotterdam, which he destroyed on orders. Remembers Sevastopol, which burned for weeks. He does not want Paris to become another funeral pyre. But orders are orders. The FFI attacks German strongpoints, not with overwhelming force, with precision, with local knowledge, with 4 years of pent-up rage channeled into tactical action. German units find themselves isolated. Not by American armor, by French civilians with weapons, by former soldiers who never accepted defeat, by shopkeepers and students and clerks who remember what freedom means. A Wehrmacht tactical report from August 22nd describes the situation. Resistance forces demonstrate unexpected military competence. Attacks coordinated. Defensive positions well chosen. Cannot confirm if enemy leadership includes former French military officers, but tactical sophistication suggests professional guidance. Enemy morale extremely high. Standard counterinsurgency measures proving insufficient. The report is correct. The FFI include hundreds of former French army officers, men who went underground in 1940, who spent 4 years learning how to fight a different kind of war, who trained in basements and fields and forests while Vichy France pretended to be neutral. They are not neutral now. August 24th. The French 2nd Armored Division, commanded by General Philippe Leclerc, reaches the outskirts of Paris. Leclerc is another officer who said no in 1940, another man who chose exile over acceptance, who rebuilt himself and his soldiers in the desert and the mountains and now comes home. He has explicit orders from American command. Wait for American infantry. Secure the approaches. Do not enter the city until support arrives. Leclerc ignores the orders. His soldiers have been waiting 4 years. So has Paris. The 2nd Armored Division enters Paris against orders, against tactical wisdom, against everything American command recommends. They enter because they are French, and it is Paris and the city is calling for them. German defenders expect American tanks, prepared for American tactics, trained to fight American soldiers who follow doctrine and wait for support and advance methodically. Instead, they face Frenchmen who know every street, who have cousins and brothers and fathers in the FFI, who receive intelligence from civilians, who fight as if the city itself is giving them strength. August 25th. Von Coulthard surrenders. Paris intact. Bridges standing. Notre Dame unburned. Hitler's orders ignored. Later, von Coulthard explains his decision. Political calculation. Military pragmatism. Humanitarian concern. But a German staff officer, interviewed after the war, suggests another reason. The general saw what the French soldiers and resistance did, how they fought. He knew that even if he destroyed Paris, the French would never stop. They would hunt us, every street, every building, until none of us left alive. You cannot defeat that kind of enemy. So he chose not to try. September 1944. Wehrmacht intelligence produces a comprehensive assessment of French military capability. The document is classified, distributed only to senior commanders, because its conclusions are embarrassing. The assessment compares 3 French armies. The French Army of 1940, defeated in 6 weeks. The Vichy French forces, collaborationist, minimal effectiveness. The Free French forces and FFI resistance. Combined operation from 1942 through present. The conclusion is stated clinically, professionally, but the implications are devastating. Free French forces demonstrate combat effectiveness equal to or exceeding German forces in comparable situations. Morale, leadership, tactical skill, and sustained operational capability all rate significantly higher than 1940 French military. Vichy forces show minimal combat value. Resistance forces, particularly FFI urban guerrillas and FFI rural Maquis, present asymmetric threat requiring disproportionate resources to counter. Enemy French forces should be classified as elite opposition, requiring maximum respect. Maximum respect. From the Wehrmacht, 4 French soldiers. 4 years after France surrendered. The intelligence officer who authored the report includes a final section. Personal analysis. Not required. But he adds it anyway because the question haunts him. What explains a dramatic improvement in French military performance? Same national character, often same individual soldiers, same cultural background. Yet 1940 French army collapsed while 1944 French forces fight with elite capability. The primary variable appears to be voluntary service. Free French forces consist exclusively of volunteers who actively chose to continue fighting after armistice. This selection process produced military force with exceptional morale and motivation. Conclusion: mandatory military service produced 1940 army that could be defeated through traditional means. Voluntary service produced 1944 force that cannot be broken because every soldier already made commitment to fight regardless of cost. Recommend future assessments account for motivation as force multiplier equivalent to superior equipment or numerical advantage. The report is filed, read by a few dozen commanders, then forgotten, because 3 months later, Germany is retreating. 6 months later, Germany is defending the Rhine. 9 months later, Germany surrenders, and the story of how the French military rehabilitated itself becomes a footnote. After the war, the narrative solidifies. France fell in 1940, collaborated through Vichy, was liberated by Americans. The Free French? A symbol, a political gesture. De Gaulle's vanity project. The FFI? Helpful locals, brave amateurs. The French Expeditionary Corps in Italy? Barely mentioned. Wartime? A minor action, unimportant. Operation Dragoon? An American operation that happened to include some French units. The liberation of Paris? An American achievement that Leclerc rushed to claim credit for. Hollywood makes the movies. American directors. American producers. American perspective. In The Longest Day, French paratroopers get 30 seconds of screen time. In Saving Private Ryan, no free French soldiers appear at all. In Band of Brothers, the liberation of Europe is an American story with British support. France is a location, not a participant. The narrative becomes true through repetition. France fell. America saved them. Simple story. Clean story. But German military records tell a different truth. The truth Rommel acknowledged at Wartime. The truth Wehrmacht commanders learned in Italy. The truth von Colditz understood in Paris. The French did not stop fighting. They were never broken. They were only waiting for the chance to prove it. And when that chance came, they fought better than they had in 1940. Not because they were different people, but because they were fighting for different reasons. In 1940, French soldiers fought because their government ordered them to fight, because duty and law and tradition demanded it. In 1944, they fought because they chose to fight, because exile and resistance and 4 years of refusal had transformed duty into conviction. That difference changes everything. There's a museum in Paris, the Musée de l'Ordre de la Libération, dedicated to the Free French forces and the resistance. Few tourists visit. Most walk past heading to the Eiffel Tower or the Louvre. Inside, there are letters, reports, photographs, equipment. There's Rommel's report from Wartime, the original, preserved behind glass. There's a German assessment of French performance in Italy, the admission that they should not be underestimated. There's von Colditz surrender document, Paris intact. There's the Wehrmacht intelligence summary from September 1944, the one that calls the Free French elite opposition requiring maximum respect. The enemy's testimony, because sometimes the clearest truth comes from those who fought against you. The French army of 1940 has dominated the historical narrative. 6 weeks of failure. Photographs of soldiers surrendering. Stories of collapse and collaboration. But there was another French army. The one that said no when their government said yes to defeat. The one that chose exile over acceptance. The one that rebuilt itself in the desert and the mountains and the streets of occupied cities. The army that earned respect from the Wehrmacht, not through propaganda, not through myth, but through 16 days at Wartime, through mountains in Italy, through August in Paris, through choosing to fight when fighting seemed impossible. That army deserves to be remembered, not because they were perfect, not because war should be celebrated, but because they demonstrated something important about human choice and dignity and resilience. They proved that collapse is not inevitable, that defeat does not have to be final, that soldiers who fight by choice fight differently than soldiers who fight by order. The Germans learned this lesson, wrote it in their reports, filed it carefully. Then we forgot it, but the documents remain, in archives, in museums, in the margins of history, waiting for someone to read them, waiting to complicate the simple story, waiting to remind us that France did not stop fighting in 1940. France just changed how it fought, and who did the fighting. And by 1944, even their enemies noticed a difference. If this story changed how you think about World War II France, share it, because complexity deserves more attention than simplicity. And the soldiers who chose to keep fighting deserve more than a footnote. The Wehrmacht gave them respect. History should do the same.